All right, so thank you all for being here for the virtual info session with two of our med student fellows, Josiah Perry and Paul Jones. I'm really excited for y'all to be here and learn a little bit about ASF. So we will just go on and jump in. So one of the first things that's really important is when people hear about ASF, they kind of think that it's a little bit more about this giant service project, which is kind of the bulk of the experience. But what I want to communicate to you all before we start is that this is really a learning experience for people who want to use their really valuable knowledge, skills, and training that they're getting right now in graduate school to address unmet needs in the community and be able to uplift marginalized folks. So with that, our mission isn't just to give you this year experience and help you do this service project. What we really want to do is provide you with the connections, support, and guidance, not just to complete this within your fellowship year, but to really want to continue doing this after you have completed the ASF experience. So it's not just about the 1 year, it's about getting you all to want to continue doing this into the future. So I'm going to throw this up on the screen real quick. We have 3 QR codes here. Don't feel like you got to get these immediately because they're going to come back in a couple minutes once I give you all some information about ASF. But on the left, you can look at some of the other info sessions. If there's other people more aligned with your discipline that you want to hear from, you can see some of our previous info sessions. You can also get in touch with me if you see anybody on our website that you were like, oh, they're doing something interesting. I'd love to know how they navigated ASF. And I'm happy to try and connect you all to either any of our current or former fellows. The middle QR code is probably the most important. That's to indicate your interest in applying for ASF. That gives us the opportunity to be able to communicate with you, send you some tips about the application process, give you reminders about that type of stuff. And then we stop emailing you after the application deadline in January 8th. So you don't have to worry about us just bombing your email. We just want to make sure that you know that the application deadline is coming up and to be able to provide you support and opportunities to get further support if that's something that you're looking for throughout the application process. So, and then on the right is going to be our application itself. That is actually live right now, so you can take a look at the application, see what you're getting into. I personally feel like the application is a low lift based on some of the big applications that I've done in my career, but you can decide that for yourself. But be able to take a look at it. You can download a template to work from at the very top. And then if you want to, this is just my pitch that I'm going to pitch to y'all a couple times throughout this evening, is for application support. I love to provide y'all with support throughout the application process. So with something like the application, you're welcome to download that template, draft out some of your responses and send it to me to get some feedback to make sure that it's going to give you the best chances of going on to that next round when we do interviews. So tonight, these are kind of the big things that we're going to address, but I also like this to be informal. So if you all have a question, feel free to, I don't mind interruptions, and we probably won't take the full hour that's scheduled. So feel free to come off of mute, drop a question in the chat, or we'll stick around at the end if that's your preference to be able to ask a question then. But these are kind of the big things that we're going to be addressing tonight. So understanding how ASF prepares fellows for their future careers, details about that big service project I was telling you about, the application process and requirements to be eligible for ASF in the first place. One of the big things is the time commitment. A lot of y'all are in some of the busiest years of your lives. So trying to figure out how fellows are able to navigate the time commitment of ASF with their school and work responsibilities. And then advice from current and former fellows. So jumping into this service project, you can see on the left, it's going to be a 200-hour service project. We have Paul and Josiah here who are a partner project. I definitely encourage anybody who knows somebody that either you're aligned with interests on, or you communicate well with, or you work well with, somebody that you would be comfortable going through this experience with. It's always great to apply with a partner project. That's not to say you can't do it individually, because it's very doable individually. We have plenty of fellows that are working through their projects individually. It's just a very unique experience. And anybody that has gone through unique experiences knows that it's great to have somebody else that's gone through that, because you can talk to them about what's going on, support each other, et cetera, et cetera. But with that 200-hour service project, that's kind of split in the middle with the hours. So you're going to have 100 indirect service hours. And that's going to be racked up pretty easily over the course of the year, right? This is going to be your planning, your communication, your research, your doing work on your project plan and things like that. Everything that goes on into laying the infrastructure for your project and kind of managing it as it goes along are going to be your indirect service hours. Direct service hours are a little bit different, and it's project specific, what that looks like, right? Not every single project is going to have somebody just sitting down, delivering an intervention with somebody and measuring the results of that intervention. We have capacity building projects. One example right now in our current cohort is one of our fellows is trying to raise awareness about child sex trafficking in healthcare spaces. So training nurses to be able to spot red flags and impact policy about what to do when you encounter somebody that has a red flag, right? So that isn't sitting down and doing something with somebody. That's more of a capacity building. So those direct service hours are going to look a little bit different than one that has a direct intervention. All of that to say, one of the themes that I hope you get out of tonight is that this ASF experience tends to be flexible. We like to give our fellows control over the experience as best as we can, over their time, their energy, and what they're doing and what that looks like. So flexibility, communication is a big thing to be able to say, hey, I'm doing this. Will that count as direct service hours? And being able to hold those conversations, because every single thing is going to look, every project is going to look a little bit different what direct service is. So what you'll be doing is collaborating with a community organization. You will find an unmet need in the community, be able to contextualize that with some data, like a community needs assessment, come up with a project idea to be able to fill that need, and work with a service organization that you can identify in the community, or we can help you identify, that's either, you know, interested in that need or works with the population you're wanting to work with. You're going to plan, implement, and evaluate a 200-hour service project to fill that need in the course of the year. So that is very project management focused, right? You're going to have project planning, implementation, and evaluation skills to either create a new program or build upon an existing one. Y'all do not need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to what you're doing with your projects. So I want to make sure you all know that. And if this is an experience that you want to do, but you don't necessarily know exactly what the project would be, then we love to hold those types of conversations with you all to figure out what your interests are and what opportunities there are in the community for you to be able to follow those interests and have a good experience over the next year. So don't let it discourage you if you don't feel like you know specifically what you want to do. We're happy to help you. And one of the big things that we do at ASF is try and provide guidance for y'all who want to do this type of stuff. Another part of the experience is going to be our educational workshops. So that orientation retreat at the top right on April 15th and 16th is mandatory. That's going to be kind of the kickoff of the ASF experience, where we have an overnight. We do a lot of work on our projects. We start putting pen to paper when it comes to outcome statements, kind of envisioning the impact that we want to have and creating the first steps towards making that impact happen and figuring out how we can make that come to reality. Those retreats are also quarterly. So those tend to be in person, but between retreats, we also have monthly meetings. Those are virtual. They tend to be at about an hour to 2 hours. We normally bring somebody in from the community to talk to you all about the cool work they're doing. A lot of our fellows continue the conversation with the people who come to our educational workshops, and it's a great opportunity to get connections. We also do some team building, personal, professional development, and we always work on our projects at least a little bit to be able to address challenges, because one of the themes that comes up throughout doing any type of service project are barriers and challenges. So that's just kind of baked into the experience to discuss navigating those challenges and what they are. And then we also do monthly reports that again, flexibility, we try to be pretty lenient on. Those tend to be due on the first of the month, but we don't hound you all. They're just a really great opportunity to be able to communicate with ASF and with your mentors. You'll have a mentor on the faculty side and a mentor at the service organization where you do your project. So monthly reports are a great way to be able to communicate with them, what's going on, how things are going, and also to ask for any support that you might need throughout that next month. And then time to problem solve and collaborate with peers. One of my favorite things is the interdisciplinary aspect of the fellowship. So just with this class alone, we have med students, pharmacy, nutrition, nursing, counseling. There's more, social work, audiology. I know I'm missing one, but I'm just going to keep going. Anyway, the cool thing about that is that we have a bunch of different perspectives that sit at that table. And one, you can contribute to other fellows' projects with your unique perspective, and you can get the perspectives of people from other disciplines to be able to help guide yours. It's one of the places where the magic happens. So going into those project domains, the main takeaway from this slide that I want y'all to have is that The projects are really broad. You can go onto our website and look at current and past fellows projects, and there's just a really wide range of opportunities to be able to do this. If you can think of, if you know a need that needs to be addressed, there's a service organization that you can work with to address it, then there's a pretty good chance that you can do it. So if you have an idea and you want to make sure that it's something that's doable and something that will help you get through the application process smoothly, then again, feel free to reach out to me for application support. And one of my favorite parts is discussing projects. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me and go to the website to get an idea of what the projects have been, so you can hopefully get inspired with some ideas of your own. So learning about the bulk of the experience, I wanted to throw the QR codes up again. I'll leave this up here for just a little bit, and you can scan that center one to be able to indicate your interest in applying for ASF. And again, watch the fellow videos to get an idea of the breadth of projects that have been done in the past and are being done right now. And that's where you can go to be able to see those projects. So the benefits of ASF, they're really numerous. You know, you'll learn from your site and academic mentors. This is where you get some guidance and some connections. The mentorship aspect is really great because you have a side on the university, you also have one at the service organization. So you're getting two perspectives, you're getting to develop relationships with people, and there's sort of baked in references and things like that because you're having a really high quality professional experience with these folks over the course of an entire year. So you get to know each other, they get to know your skills, and the people who step into those mentorship roles really want you all to succeed. And similarly to us, they want you to continue doing this stuff into the future. So I hope that you'll find with your mentorship that that's one of the most valuable parts of this experience, just to be able to be in communication and collaboration with these folks that are already doing good work and want to support you in doing good work yourself. There's also the $2,500 stipend as compensation. Just a quick note on that, that is something that we dispense over the course of the year. So it's not like you have to go through the entire ASF experience and at the end you get your stipend. We have benchmarks for you and milestones that we set. And once you hit those, then we'll give you a part of the stipend. So right now, we're giving out the third chunk of the stipend, and that's dependent on having a mid-year meeting with me and accomplishing 100 of your service hours cumulatively, so whether that's direct or indirect. And then the National Alumni Network is great. There's continuing opportunities to connect with former fellows, not just in the state of Alabama, but across the country. And again, with that interdisciplinary aspect, it's really cool to be able to hear from people across the country doing interesting work and continuing to use the guidance and support that they received from ASF in continuing to do really cool work. So qualifications, you need to be a graduate student. You have to be enrolled as in one of those programs, either full-time or part-time through April of 2025. So that fall semester, that's when the ASF cohort is going to end next. So you'll need to be enrolled throughout that entire time. The projects do need to be within Alabama, so anywhere across the state. But if you're looking to commute, that's something that you should probably have a conversation with us about, just so you can maximize that drive time in order to get some of those at least indirect hours. There's opportunities if you're doing a drive to get indirect hours while you do it, but you want to be really mindful about your time going into this experience and ideally try and keep it within, you know, an area that's not too far from you. But if you're doing that, like I said, talk to us about how to get indirect hours while you're commuting. And then like I said, that orientation in April is an overnight and it's mandatory. So if you can make that and you're going to be enrolled through April of 2025, then you are eligible to apply, and I really hope you do. And with that, for a little bit, I'm going to turn it over to Paul and Josiah. They're doing awesome work, and I'm going to let them tell you a little about their experience with ASF and how their project's going. So Paul and Josiah, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and y'all can take it from here.
Do you want to start, Paul, or?
Sure, I can start. My name is Paul. I'm super excited to be here with y'all today. I'm a second-year medical student at UAB. And yeah, it's excited to really answer any questions y'all may have about the Schweitzer Fellowship. I'm excited that y'all are here today and, you know, want to learn more about this really awesome fellowship.
And I'm Josiah, also a second year, and I am really happy to see so many faces here today, especially over fall break. So look forward to fielding some questions, and if we don't get any questions, then we can just dive into some of the really common ones that tend to pop up.
I can ask a question. How did y'all come up with your project? Like, did it sort of come to fruition like over time, or did you come into this knowing what you wanted to do?
Both. Yeah, we came into it with an idea of what we wanted to do, and it quickly evolved from that into something quite a bit different. And I think that's like kind of one of the harder parts about this project is, figuring out, what your project's going to be, like kind of narrowing down on that. And I think one of the things that I wish I had known early on is that it's okay to not pick the right project from the start. Finding a community that has a need that you're actually able to, contribute to in a significant and meaningful way, given, the time constraints of only having a year and the financial constraints, it's not an easy thing to do. So, your first idea may not be the one that ends up working out. Or in the case of Josiah, I don't think our first two ideas were the one. I think it took us 3 ideas until we landed on our project. I think my advice in terms of, thinking about a project, starting a project, I think it's really valuable to start with a need and then design your project around that need. I think maybe in the beginning, Josiah and we tried to design a project rather than like looking for a need in our community. So I think that's one way where you can maybe save yourself some time, because I remember our first project, we were interested in working with some schools that were underperforming in Birmingham. And we actually sat down with, the community site for the first time after already designing a lot of the project. And we were like, oh, wow, like y'all are already doing a lot of the things that we had in mind. So I think if we had started, with that earlier on in the process, it would have been, probably a better idea. So
yeah,
Josiah, anything to add?
I think what I would add to that discussion is that you're really going to save yourself some time and probably have a more impactful project if you start dirty. And by that, I mean, just get in there, talk to people who do the thing you're interested in doing, ask them what their needs are, and try something. I guarantee that whatever you try for the first time is not going to work, and you're going to need to iterate on it. So you might as well just get that out of the way, figure out what those failure points are. The planning is important, but equally important is seeing what you overlooked in the planning, and you're going to overlook stuff. Like that's just guaranteed to happen. So if I were to redo stuff, I would have just like gotten started way, way earlier and planned iteratively, right? So try something, get feedback, go back to the drawing board, and just, I would have started way, way earlier, just doing things, because our project, even once we got the, site kind of figured out and the broad goal of the project figured out, and we had this really detailed project plan, the project has still taken several turns. Every month it takes a little bit of a turn as we figure out more things about the population we're working with that we didn't know before, or more things about the site we're working with that we hadn't really thought about before.
Then one more thing I'll add. I know Keaton already kind of mentioned this, but you can go online onto the ASF website and you can see all previous projects that I think for the last 10 years, maybe longer. And that's like, if you're at the drawing board and you're, want to get some like creative juices flowing, that's like a very helpful thing to do and kind of see what, past projects look like, the type of problems that past fellows have kind of been focusing on. So I would definitely recommend that.
Thank y'all. And can one or both of y'all just give a quick elevator pitch to let everybody know what your project is? Just because I think it's cool and I want to make sure they know.
So Paul and I are working with Cooper Green's resident-run mod clinic to do a combination of some medication reconciliation with patients and improving what's called health efficacy of patients who go there with a variety of chronic conditions. We're doing that primarily by measuring literacy first off. In fact, the data didn't exist before we got there regarding what proportion of patients going to the mod clinic were literate in the first place. We're getting baseline data about their health efficacy, and by that I mean their subjective sense of their ability to control aspects of their own health or to make their health better. Then we're trying workshops, which are still being tweaked over time to improve that health efficacy, and measuring directly after the workshop what changes were made or not made in that person's health efficacy after the fact. But there might be things we tack on, later on in the year once we, just, kind of figure stuff out on the go. But that's the gist of it anyway.
Thank y'all for that. And one thing that I'm really grateful, Paul and Josiah, that y'all mentioned that I want to mention to everybody here before we get back to the rest of the presentation is that when it comes to selecting a project idea, the project ideas that you apply with aren't ones that you're locked into. So Paul and Josiah really demonstrate that, where what they ended up applying with isn't what they're actually doing. And a big part of that is because they had to iterate and just change gears because, like they said, what they were wanting to do was kind of already being implemented. But that application is giving us at ASF an idea of how you all think about community needs and how to address them. So I don't want you all to think that the service organization, the project idea, or anything like that is set in stone when you all apply. That is just to give us an idea of how y'all think about this. And then those ideas can come to fruition with that mentorship, guidance, and support that you get once the fellowship sort of starts. So with that, I'll get back to the presentation real quick. All right. So project ideas, we kind of covered this, but asking whether there's an identified need. In the newsletter that we'll send out to you, we will also share with you places where you can get data to contextualize that need. Is that something that you have to do for the application? Not necessarily. Is it something that will absolutely set you ahead while all of us are reading the applications, especially the advisory council? Definitely. So I highly recommend not even needing to formally cite something, but having some sort of data point to be able to contextualize that need in your application is going to be really important in setting you ahead of the pack. And if that's something that you're struggling with or you want some guidance with, again, reach out to me. I love that data nerdy contextualizing the need stuff. So I'm happy to be able to connect you to some of those resources so you can use those data points to your advantage in the application. And we want you all to do something that's aligned with your skills, your interests, and something that you're inspired by. You heard from Paul and Josiah, they had to change project ideas a couple times. So being able to be interested and excited about what you're doing is something that's really important to just keep you kind of going throughout the ASF experience. Because you're not just doing ASF, which can be a challenge in its own. Y'all are also going through some really busy times in your professional and educational careers. So making sure that you're aligned with what you're doing is something that's really important. And like I said, you all can reach out to us if you want help narrowing down your project ideas, and we're happy to be able to work with you to kind of like figure out what your interests are and what opportunities there are in the community to be able to go with those. And the time commitment. This is something that is, a challenge for everybody. So I'd love, Paul and Josiah, if y'all can let everybody know a little bit how you manage the time commitment with ASF and also, still maintain your sanity in a crazy year.
Josiah, would you like to start?
Oh, sure. It seems pretty daunting when you just look at it on paper. We get a lot of support from Kristen and Keaton and a lot of help troubleshooting problems when they arise, but also a lot of support when things get so busy that it's hard to keep the project going. You really just need to make sure to communicate. If stuff is too busy for a certain window, as long as you're open about not having as much time for ASF for a week or two, then that is compatible with doing a Schweitzer project. But in terms of the week to week, even in M2, even in MSK, or when you've got a lot of anatomy labs and whatnot, it's thankfully it's pretty doable to kind of just carve out 1 or 2 hours, at least 2 or 3 days a week to just do something for your project. It doesn't really have to be a crazy large amount, just chipping away at it over time, and just spending some time. I mean, for our project, thankfully, it's a lot of just talking to people, which doesn't feel incredibly laborious. It's kind of fun, and just kind of hearing everyone's perspective who comes to Cooper Green, because you get some really interesting people sometimes who come through. But it really hasn't felt. I was really worried about being overwhelmed when I applied, and I was asking all the fellows, like, hey, do you guys sleep enough? Are you guys able to get your 8 hours in? I have generally slept 8 hours a night, and still managed to keep the project going.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. One thing I'll add, and it took us maybe a couple months to figure this out, and we still are far from perfect at it. But I think having like a standing, dedicated, and protected time each week to kind of focus on your project is really nice. So one thing that we try and do is like Mondays at 5 p.m. That's a time that, usually we don't have any other like conflicting, obligations. So we try and meet and talk about, what do we want to do this week? What do we want to do this month? And kind of like look at the project from, the big picture, I guess. And I think with projects like these, where it is kind of a long-term, year-long project, it is easy for, the different objectives that you have to kind of take a back burner when you have 10 different things going on every week and an exam coming up and things like that. So yeah, I would definitely recommend finding a protected time that that you and your partner, I guess if you're doing a project by yourself, knowing that you're just going to have that time to think about your project. And then also, like Keaton said, having a partner is extremely helpful, not only from like the time commitment side, but also, it's easier when you have two minds kind of looking at the same problems. You don't get stuck as long with things. So I think it creates a richer project. I think it's generally a good idea.
Yeah, I guess
Thank y'all. Oh no, go ahead, Josiah.
Oh, I was just gonna say one final bit, and some of y'all might have already kind of internalized something like this, but something I've learned over the past year, with projects like this, like as long as you are not a perfectionist about doing things, you just do stuff and accept it's not gonna be perfect. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes as you're doing it. It's easy to make sure it keeps moving along. So done imperfectly is better than not done for many things. And so it's something that I had to internalize, especially over M2 so far.
And one thing I love that Josiah says is that's something that we're really trying to foster in our fellows, is that this, like I've said before, this is a learning experience. And part of that learning is being able to get to a point in that project and reflect and say, if I'm doing this again, I would have done this differently. I would have done this differently. I maybe would have thought about this. And all of that is exactly where a fellow is supposed to be, because in the future, when they're doing those projects, they're going to know what to think about and anticipate beforehand. So I really appreciate that comment, because I think that always is a good indicator to me that they're right where they're supposed to be. And also with the time commitment, I'll just tell y'all a quick anecdote about somebody from the last cohort. They did a very heavy front-loaded project. So they looked at their schedule throughout the year and saw, okay, the summer is the time when I have the most free time. Once fall comes, I'm not going to really have as much time to do this project. So they set themselves a pretty aggressive timetable. And that's where I said flexibility is going to be a theme. The fellows set the timetables for themselves in their project plan. They set their milestones and when they're supposed to happen, and alter those as they need to as they go about. So this fellow worked really hard in the summer, did a bunch of stuff, was completely burnt out after that, which is to be expected, because that's a whole other side story. Her project was really interesting. But what she did was communicate to us and say that, I'm burnt out, I'm exhausted, my hours have been just crazy the last couple months. I really need to go under a rock. So if y'all need me, just reach out. But otherwise, I'm just going radio silent until next month. And, that fellow came to that monthly meeting and popped in there and did those like little things that were expected, but otherwise, was just off the radar. And us, you communicate that to us, we honor that. We also kind of applaud that fellow, because that's really good at taking care of yourself. And being able to anticipate, hey, this fall's coming, I'm not going to be able to manage this. So that's just an example that I like to tell y'all of the flexibility that we like to provide you all, and the control that we like you all to have over what your project looks like and how that ASF experience unfolds for you. And so this is my quick little plug for an accommodation statement. If anybody here needs or wants, or anybody seeing this recording of this video needs or wants accommodations, either for the application process or for the fellowship itself, then I want y'all to feel comfortable reaching out to me and having an open conversation about how we can provide that for you, because we want this process to be as comfortable for you all as possible, so you all feel as confident as possible. We also want to roll out that welcome mat really wide to be able to get a diverse range of perspectives on how to address unmet needs in the community and what those needs look like. So if there's something that might prevent you or somebody else from being able to participate that we could accommodate, then please feel free to reach out and let me know so we can make those accommodations and get you as a part of the fellowship. So the selection process, going into real quick the what that looks like. We have a pretty quick turnaround when it comes to application and selection. So on January 8th is our application deadline. And then our interview offers are going to go out January 16th. Right around that, we're going to have the interviews at the end of January, and fellows are going to be notified February 1st. So it's pretty quick. We also begin our cohort year on February 11th. Now, this is going to be more of like a virtual orientation. So it's very clerical in nature. You're not expected to just hit the ground running with your projects at this point. We do some team building and get, some of the paperwork that we need to get done out of the way so that the projects can be a focus. And that gives you all a little bit more time before March, when the fellowship really begins to start those conversations with us, with potential community partners, and get you some more time to be able to lay the foundation for your project before we start making those in-depth project plans. And then the orientation is April 13th and 14th. On April 13th is when we have what we call our celebration of service. And we basically say goodbye to the current class and welcome to the new class. And once that event's over, we all get in our cars, go somewhere ridiculously beautiful, and start working on our projects and do the retreat. So it's a pretty quick turnaround once you hit that application and submit the application. And then the fellowship itself, orientation is on February 11th, like I said. We do some onboarding type stuff there. Then you can shadow and start shadowing and volunteering at your sites. One thing I'm going to throw in here that's great about those direct service hours is that you can get up to 20 direct service hours at this time before you've even started your project by shadowing your site, building rapport where you're going to be, volunteering, kind of whatever that looks like, and what you'd be doing naturally to be able to start showing your face around where you're going to be and doing your project. So you can knock out a chunk of those direct service hours before you even start implementing your project by building rapport at your organization. So I think that's really cool and an opportunity to knock out some of those hours early. We'll draft goals at that orientation, the retreat in April 13th and 14th. In June, we start doing the project plans, and ideally you have a project plan that's been signed off on by us and your academic and site mentor by the end of June, which means you start implementing your project in July. And then in the blink of an eye, that's over in March of 2025 when that celebration of service happens again, and you will have completed your project in April. And so with that, does anybody have any questions for us? I'm going to pull up one that I got from the online form, but if anybody has a question, feel free to come off of mute real quick while I pull it up. Okay, so the question was, should you apply if your project is potentially not as achievable, i.e. working towards a syringe exchange in Alabama? That's an amazing question, and I'm really glad this question was asked because it's something that can trip people up in the application. So when you have this sort of big view of a project and this large substantive structural change, thinking about how difficult that is to achieve in the course of the year with $100 of seed money is just, it doesn't seem plausible. And that's because it's probably not. But what you can do is think about that issue, think about that unmet need in a larger context, and then see what little parts of that issue that you can bite off throughout that. So maybe it's raising awareness about the benefits of the needle exchange program with the stakeholders. Something like that, just being able to think in a little bit more of a research mindset. So we can't fix this structural problem, but what's this little part that we can fix? How can I be a part in making that larger change happen throughout the course of this year? I hope that answers your question. If you have a follow-up question with that, then feel free to let me know. But I just really appreciate that question because that can be a place where people get tripped up in the application, is having a vision for what they want to happen with the unmet need, and then trying to figure out what that little piece of that problem that they can fix within the course of a year is. That's that little piece you're going to want to focus on. But that larger picture is something that's really important to show ASF that you're invested in the larger structural problem that you're trying to address, but you're also, in the mindset of, I probably can't make this happen by myself in the course of a year, but what can I make happen? So thank you for that question. Do any of you all have any other questions for us?
I had a quick question. I was just curious what you did when you were planning your project, if you considered like the longevity once your project and once you're done, what happens after that?
That is an aspect you're actually asked about, if I recall correctly, in the original application. Of course, we planned for it and immediately our plan fell to pieces and we had to come up with another approach to longevity. What I found most helpful for our project specifically, and this is probably going to vary by project, there's someone at Cooper Green, his name is Dr. Taylor. He's super into public health and epidemiology, and he's really plugged in to all of the social workers and community health workers that go out of Cooper Green and actually make impacts in the individual neighborhoods of Birmingham. So we've been talking a lot to Dr. Taylor about ways we can carry this forward, future directions. Something in particular we're looking at right now is things we can do with what we've already made for our project that we can give to those community health workers who are already going out of Cooper Green to the neighborhoods to make an impact, especially with respect to healthier eating, for example, or regular exercise, or what the recommendations are on average for people to avoid some chronic health conditions. But other things you can think about are involving organizations on campus, like your Dynamic Healths or your Empower or whatever is relevant for your project, and seeing if there's a way you can get regular volunteers from those groups or just plug in like the mission of those groups with what you've got going on. But site mentors are actually very, very helpful for that specifically.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Having, particularly in the early stages of a project, when you're maybe even before you've like created your project proposal, like having those conversations with people that are super plugged into the community, it's very valuable, because maybe you're interested in education, or maybe you're interested in, food or whatever it may be, and you talk to one of those people and they have, 10 different people on their contact list that are, invested in that world. It can, kind of help you kickstart your project pretty quickly. I see some UAB faces on here. Dr. Harada is one of those people. She's incredibly plugged in. We met with her multiple times when we were talking about our project, and she's a part of the fellowship as well. Kristen, Keaton, great people to talk to about, thinking about particular site mentors, things like that. So yeah, I agree with all of that.
And one quick thing, I really encourage y'all to reach out to both Kristen and Keaton, even while you're applying, because especially Kristen was like so helpful for us getting our project together and helping us think about some things preemptively that we needed to address.
And I'll just jump on there real quick. Andy, that's an awesome question, because it shows it's sort of like an eye for sustainability. And that's something that we want the projects to be. We want them to have life beyond the fellowship year. But that's also something that, like Paul and Josiah said, is great to have conversations with your site mentor, because they're going to want to and be invested in that project continuing. One of the cool things is that could look different depending on the project. So for some people, they envision it as somebody like another person coming in and continuing it. Another one that I thought was really cool last year, she had a couple pieces of sustainability, but she worked with parents who had lost a child to cancer and wanted to impact policies in the hospital about what happens when a parent loses a child, because it can be really traumatic. And some of the things that the hospital is required to do can be really hurtful for the parents. And one of the things that she did, she found out while she was doing kind of focus groups with her families and talking to them, doing some structured interviews, was that people that want to help when somebody's grieving say things that are just so harmful to the helping and the healing process. And so she just created a cool little thing that can be passed around social media about like do's and don'ts when somebody you care about has lost a loved one. And something like that, I think, is such a beautiful, simple, and innovative way of giving a project life beyond the fellowship year, because that's something that people will see and use, and it cues people into, okay, this is a tough situation. I want to be supportive. I don't want to say the wrong thing. And then it gives them pathways for action to be able to say the correct thing and be supportive. So anyway, that was one of the things I thought was cool. And sustainability is a little spoiler for Paul and Josiah. That's going to be the focus of our coaching sessions next month. So we also provide support and guidance along the way to be able to have those conversations. So you're not blindsided at the end trying to figure out how this can continue. Awesome question. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I had a quick question. It sounds like your project has changed a lot since you applied. I was just curious, like how fleshed out your project was at the time of the application, and like if y'all could go into a little more detail about that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I can get started at least. So Paul and I had this brilliant idea when we were applying to Albert Schweitzer that we would create this pilot curriculum for this organization called Breakthrough Birmingham that would incorporate elements of spaced repetition and interleaving of concepts within the same lesson. So for example, if someone were doing a lesson on general chemistry, there would be some interweaving of geometry concepts they might be learning in a separate lesson. And all of these, like, things are well established in learning theory. I'm like, oh man, we can really just kind of hone in and make this curriculum awesome. And we had fleshed out, like a reasonably detailed start, for, such that you could at least get started. And we sit down with the director of Breakthrough Birmingham and we try to sell her on the idea. She says, oh, that sounds great. Let me send you our current lesson plans and get you in contact with, the people in charge of our curriculum. And so we looked through the lesson plans and they have everything we had already proposed in those lesson plans. So we pivoted. Dr. Harada had recommended a medication reconciliation program at Cooper Green. So we reached out to Cooper Green or she didn't recommend Cooper Green. I forget where exactly. I think Cooper Green was like one of the places she recommended, but there were like a couple of others. So reach out to a bunch of folks. Rebecca Will at the Mod Clinic gets back to us and says, hey, we like where you're headed with this. Let's talk more. And through several conversations with Rebecca Will and then some pharmacists who work over at Cooper Green and an internist over there who kind of dedicates all of her time to Cooper Green, we later learned that a focus exclusively on medication reconciliation wasn't actually what was most needed, among that patient group. And so we pivoted again to a focus, especially talking with Dr. Taylor, who's not technically on our advisory committee, but is really an insightful voice. He's one of the people who's at the resident run clinic, at least once a week. And we've now finally pivoted to more of a focus on improving health efficacy. But that was kind of like the however many iteration. That was like the last iteration of it I lost count of how many, but.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to someone the other day, I forget who it was, but they were talking about making changes in the curriculum of medical education. And they said that making those changes was kind of like trying to turn like a cruise ship rather than like a speedboat. And I guess my advice would be don't be a cruise ship. Like, be flexible, be willing to like pivot very fast. If you're gonna fail, like fail early, and be willing to like let go of an idea if you don't think it's gonna work out. I think that was pretty valuable to Josiah and I. So to answer your question, I guess, like I think it's almost maybe kind of a mistake if you have a super fleshed out project before actually kind of meeting with the stakeholders, whether that be the site mentor, the people who have lived experience, whatever that may be. I think that's kind of something to think about.
Any other questions? All right, well, if nobody has any questions, then I'm really grateful that y'all are here, and I look forward to hopefully reading your applications in the future. And like I said, feel free to reach out for any support that you want or need throughout the application process. That's also a way for us to kind of know who you are. And I don't get a vote when it comes to who gets in the fellowship, but I am able to tell the advisory council my experiences with the people who are applying and who have made it to that round. So I'm not saying that you have to do it, but it's always great for me to have an idea to be able to advocate for you all, your project, and your place in the fellowship if it's if you want some support. So thank you all so much, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.